Mr. Frost is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, here we go again. Committee Republicans are so adverse to actual oversight that they're trying to reinvent two of their most tired narratives. First off, Republicans act like the voters of D.C. are incapable of self-governance, so much for the party of small government. And second, Republicans cry out about rampant voter fraud to explain away the fact that they can't win over the majority of Americans when we talk about the people who are going to vote. The truth is that voter fraud incidents are scattered and amount to less than a rounding error in election results. We know that to be true. We heard a witness say, you're more likely to be struck by a bolt of lightning to find a legitimate voter fraud case. The truth is that D.C. election system is among the most accessible and secure in the nation. And so the truth is that Republicans are holding this hearing to try to push the ACE Act as part of their far-right extremist fantasy of election restrictions to help them hold power. And for people listening at home who don't know what's in this, let me tell you, annual voter roll purges, restrictions on ballot drop boxes, an outright ban on same-day voter registration, an outright ban on ballot mailing programs that will disproportionately harm elderly people and folks with disabilities, throwing away countless mail-in ballots even if they are sent days before the polls close, and for now stops just short of a poll tax and literacy test. Ms. Weiser, you're a Yale-educated attorney. You've taught at NYU Law. You've founded and directed the Voting Rights and Elections Project at the Brennan Center, and you spent your career focused on this issue. So I want to ask your opinion on a few questions. Ms. Weiser, in your opinion, are there any legitimate reasons for Americans to believe that American elections, whether in 2016, 2020, or last year, are not secure?
There's no legitimate reason to believe that there is any significant voter fraud in American elections. There are some threats to election integrity that Congress should address, but they are not voter fraud.
And when we talk about election integrity, and we're talking about the ability for Congress to ensure that people can vote, that it's accessible, that it's simple, and that it's easy. Is that what you mean by election integrity?
An election with integrity is indeed an election where every eligible American can cast a ballot. It is an election that has protections against efforts to sabotage and interfere with election outcomes and interfere in election administration. It is an election free of violence and intimidation, and an election with adequate security threats against security protections against cyber security threats.
Republican officials want to use hysteria and disinformation to justify stifling turnout because it seems like when more people vote, they end up losing. And to me, it seems like there's something wrong with your platform when you got to keep people from voting in order to win. But, Ms. Weiser, in your opinion, why might Americans believe that our election, specifically the 2020 election, lacked integrity?
Unfortunately, we've seen a real aggressive wave of dismiss and malinformation about the integrity of the 2020 election. Court case after court case, election expert after election expert, and government agency after government agency have all found that there was no significant fraud or misconduct, that it was one of the most secure the most secure election in American history, and yet that is not what many Americans are hearing through their disinformation channels.
Have you heard some of that disinformation on this committee today?
I have heard some false statements about the integrity of our elections.
You know, every day I feel like I see my colleagues on the other side of the aisle mimicking what's going on in my state, and I worked for the ACLU and knocked doors for this to restore voting rights to over 1.4 million returning citizens in the state of Florida. And a large group of these folks who served their time went to register to vote, and by election officials were given a card that said you're registered to vote. Then, months later, to have a knock at their door, to be arrested and put in jail by Ron DeSantis and the Republican Party in Florida that has created election police force to arrest people. Do things like that stifle turnout and mess with the integrity of our elections?
We are deeply concerned with those kinds of official intimidation efforts. We do believe that it is harming turnout. It is intimidating voters, not just returning citizens who are eligible to vote, but other people in their community as well.
And you want to know the thing that really gets to me? I cried when I saw those videos there was things that were in common here. They were either black, Latino, or poor. I yield back.